Hello everyone. We're finally there. We will start talking about generative AI landscape. First, I would like to give you a larger scope of the field so you get an understanding of what generative AI is, why it is important, and then we will look into specific tools that are pretty much useful for designers as of today, and then we will keep going into detail as we move forward. So, generative AI is doing more than images, more than text generation, because again, it's a field that has been invested heavily, and then the research has been going on in the field of computer science. So in 2022, Sequoia Capital, which is an investment firm, prepared this publication and just released it online. So if you Google it, Sequoia Capital, the Generative AI Application Landscape, you can read that article. What is important to understand here is that it's a large capital management company, which is, it's dealing with money, is just kind of like looking into the landscape of generative AI and trying to understand how the capital, the investments, and the developments are going to change because of this technology. So let's read this quote. It says, a powerful new class of large language models, which is LLMs, is making it possible for machines to write, code, draw, and create with credible and sometimes superhuman results. So we will discuss about that. Remember, I always talk about the importance of human insight, human experience, and so on. And even with that quote, actually, that doesn't change, right? Sometimes we think AI systems are superhuman because they are super fast and they can handle a lot of data simultaneously, unlike us. But then again, still, the outputs they give to us just statistical models that produce some results, and whether or not they are successful is still evaluated by humans, right? So never forget that. But what is important is that it's talking about large language models, so everything is dependent on models, whether you're generating code, whether you're generating drawings or text again, the system is pretty much working by using natural language. All right, so Sequoia Capital went ahead and tried to chart out what already has happened in generative AI and what may happen moving forward. So if you look at this chart, we're going to see before 2020, in the text realm, we already had spam detection, right, on our phones, on the email, and then on writing the code, there were kind of like attempts for generative systems to generate some code. So if you look at this chart, you're going to realize that it's going from red to yellow to green, which means that the red is, the first attempts that are taken in the field that is listed on the left side, which is text, code, images, and video 3D gaming. And the yellow ones are getting there. That's what they said in 22. And then green is about to happen. So interestingly, you can see in 2020, the language models were already able to generate some convincing text, which is basic copywriting, final drafts, and so on. Actually, at MIT, more than 10 years ago, there was a paper that was published which was generated by AI, right? So that technology has been there for a while. In 22, we started seeing, for instance, again in text, longer form, second drafts. In 23, which was a prediction for Sequoia Capital last year, which is this year, so it was talking about vertical fine-tuning and, it can write scientific papers and so on and so forth, which is true, right? As of today, if you use tools like ChatGPT, which I'm going to talk about in a second, actually are very convincing in generating text. And probably the final draft's better than human average is 25, right? So trying to predict into 2 years ahead is really hard, but depends on how you're using the models now. Actually, you can achieve that, right? It's not 100% true though. Like if you know how to use a text generation tool in an efficient way, actually you can create an amazingly convincing final draft. For the code, for programming, The technology is almost there. Interestingly, again, like using these tools, you can generate code. You can ask, let's say, hey, can you write me this in JavaScript? Or, hey, I wrote this in processing, which is something that I showed in the previous class, and I'm getting a bug. Can you help me fix it? So these tools would actually kind of like help you do that. Images, 22, the guess was arts, logos, photography, and actually, tools like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion were able to do that. And in 23, they were guessing, there's going to be mock-ups, product architecture and so on, design. It's true, you can make images of shoes, or buildings or products. But again, making an image of something doesn't mean that you're creating it, you're designing it, right? So we shouldn't forget about that. And again, moving into 2030, actually, I don't think anybody can really guess that far ahead because we don't know what's going to happen in 1 year or 2 years. So most of the predictions that you see there may fail or really kind of like be super successful even before 2030. You would see that the bottom row is showing video and 3D gaming. Of course, it's the hardest thing to do compared to images. For 3D gaming, you need the 3D models. And remember, these are AI and machine learning models are trained by using huge amount of data. So if you don't have that data, you cannot really train them. And the problem now we are having is that to train AI that is smart enough about 3D, we don't have the 3D models. We don't have enough 3D models in the world to design a holistic AI model in 3D. So this is important to remember. And again, we will discuss all of this in detail. This is just showing you the landscape so you have a better understanding of what's going on around the world, where we are at, where we can go, and so on and so forth. Okay. Probably you heard about Midjourney. I'm going to talk about specific tools. There was a huge list in the first slide. You can go back and check that. But we're going to talk about a couple of things which are relevant for designers. So Midjourney, probably you heard about it. Everybody was crazy about it. Still, a lot of people are using it. So the user number suddenly went from 10,000 to 100,000 people, and then 3 million, and finally they're at like 15 million people, more or less, today. The active users are changing. And the way it works is that the portrait of a wise woman, right, so I'm giving a prompt here, intricate details on her face, faded tattoos, shot by Canon EOS R, any camera you can put there. I just put it because I had that camera, not the R version, but another version. Professional lighting, backlight, there's a typo there, and then bokeh. So interestingly, these tools can fix, understand, quote unquote, the typos you make and then try to kind of go with it. So this is a text to image tool in which you give a text and you don't know what to expect. You have a mental image and then bam, something appears. So this is super, super interesting. That's why, and it's a very strong image as you see now. People were getting really interested and really engaged with this because that was something that nobody has ever seen before, right? That's very important. This is created by Midjourney version 5 dot something, right? So if you used Midjourney earlier, version 3, version 2, it would be impossible to get this, which is again due to the fact that the model has been enhanced on the road. And that was done by getting inputs from humans, interestingly, right? So all this data that is fed into Midjourney's algorithm was generating images, and the users were asked to rate the images, whichever image they find better. So all that data was fed back into Midjourney. So that's how the AI tool got better in generating these images. All right, so the question here is though, okay, to get a scene like this, for instance, in the past, well, you need a model first, and then there's a lot of, time to do the makeup and so on, and then you get the camera, the right lighting and so on. Probably it would take a full day with a lot of professional people to get this. Or on the digital side, if somebody was to model this, a super power user in like ZBrush or any other kind of 3D modeling software, let's say Maya, would spend quite a bit of time just modeling, sculpting the base model, and then generating the texture map, and then again setting the light digitally and rendering. So imagine all that workforce now to make this concept image is almost disregarded, right? So if a company needs to make a ad campaign, advertisement by using this image, actually they could have just gotten it in 30 seconds to begin with, and then you refine it. Of course, let's say it takes 5 minutes to get to the image that you like. But again, compared to what I showed in the previous class, which was, remember, we were trying to render an interior scene, which took me a semester to write, develop, it produced nothing like this one, right? So it's a very very primitive compared to what we're seeing here. So you can imagine how much faster things are now, but also you need to consider that this is a research that has been going for decades, right? AI research has been going for 7 decades, and then specific, let's say text to image or image diffusion models, SCANs, they've been going for, let's say, almost a decade. So with that, we can look into, again, this is from Sequoia Capital, we can look into some tools that were existent last year, and you're going to realize that it's really interesting. Some of these tools, they already disappeared, some of them got better, some of them, they have newer versions, the name has changed, and so on and so forth, and this is going to be the paradigm moving forward, right? So anything you are using today may disappear tomorrow, so be ready for that. For text, we have OpenAI's GPT-3. Today, as of today, we have GPT-4, which is pretty much embedded in ChatGPT. You can use it for code, as I mentioned. Actually, you can write any sort of even command prompt code that you to kind of use on your computer to automate things. Actually, I tried that and it works. You need to kind of go back and forth and fix the code, but still it's fine. For image creation, you have Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, OpenAI, DALL-E. Of course, the third version was released, if I'm not wrong. For speech, voice recognition, there are a lot of companies there. Video is emerging. I'm going to touch upon those. 3D is coming slowly because, again, the data set problems, the complexity of dealing with meshes, and so on and so forth. So this is a good one, but what we can look into is what designers are using today, and you can kind of double check if you're using those, if you have been looking into these, or if you should spend time on these. So for text and code, we mentioned ChatGPT. For image, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, Viscom AI. I'm going to touch upon them really fast. For video, Runway. Runway is interesting because they started with image and they moved to the video realm really fast within the last 2 years. And, we saw it coming 2 years ago, because going back 3 years ago, you could train SGAN, StyleGAN models, which I'm going to talk about. But now they totally shifted their, let's say, business plan and target audience. And there's Move AI, which I recently found about, which looks interesting. I haven't used it, but it might be interesting for you. So let's start with Midjourney. Midjourney is interesting. We're going to talk about these again in detail in the next class, but it's super powerful because just prompt to image, we talked about that. What I find really interesting is image blending. If you haven't tried it, please, and if you're a Midjourney user, use the blend command, which is pretty much about, taking 2 to 5 images and blending them. And it creates this interesting, unexpected result. And I think because you are using it, let's say, without the prompts, the words, it's more, in a way, imaginary and open-ended. So I would suggest you to do that. The second one about image, I really want to talk about Viscom AI, because I find this tool super, super interesting and powerful. What is different is from only prompting, only using, or using prompting and plus and base image, you can actually have a more intentional workflow, meaning, hey, I want to kind of get an image like this. I'm trying to work on, let's say here they are showing a car. this car concept. So I wanted to render it, right? So, and the render is exactly happening actually with that speed, which is amazing, right? So this is a great tool for designers because you retain, this is very important, follow this really well. You can still sketch, which is a very intuitive way of communicating your ideas, right? For designers, for architects, and then it renders it immediately, and then you can like explore variations. And what you can do is you can do changes on the fly, right? So here they are showing the, you're picking the bumper, sketching on the bumper, and then changing it. This is very reminiscent of using tracing paper, which is the like translucent transparent paper you use in design. What you do is you iterate and iterate and iterate. We talked about this in the sketching class, I think 2 lessons ago. So what's happening is that it's your way of understanding and finding clues and changing them. And what's happening, imagine this doing with a real-time render, right? So and you don't have to model in 3D, right? So a real-time render is something that has been happening already. But now, actually, with 2D sketch, actually, you're getting that, result, and you can sketch on top of it. So, and because this is happening on the fly, right? So there are some other systems that you can do this by uploading images, but just drawing on something and getting that feedback is really, really, really different. So Viscom AI, my prediction is, again, the predictions may fail, but Viscom AI, I expect it to be very widespread for industrial designers and architects especially. Because it's retaining that human input, human intuition, human intent, so they're all in play with a super powerful rendering tool. I think that's a very, very good scenario. It's there's a free version, right? So you can go to Viscom AI and just start using it. It's very, very powerful. With that, let's jump back to ChatGPT. I will go into Stable Diffusion, but it's a slightly different, thing that I want to talk about image making. But let's talk about ChatGPT. So just a reminder that all these models, Midjourney, and then we talked about Viscom, they are based on the language model, right? So these are all using the natural language, large language models to achieve what they're trying to kind of like achieve. So here, of course, OpenAI, ChatGPT has been very dominant in this space, and they keep adding features more and more. So they parsed, almost the whole web, right, which includes almost all the books known to humanity, research papers, anything on Wikipedia, of course, is already there, and so on. And then they created this huge model which is able to talk to you, right? So you ask a question, it kind of responds back, and so on. Again, it's not surprising that you can write code with it, right? So because code is a pattern, and actually it's a maybe easier pattern than understand the language, because language can be ambiguous when you change the word, the order of the words, and like we sometimes do not understand each other. We say something and somebody gets us wrong, and so on and so forth. Whereas coding is very prescribed. There are rules, and there's only one way to use that syntax and structure in the code, right? So if you make a mistake, the code would pretty much not run. So again, ChatGPT is super powerful for that purpose if you are trying to use it for code. But beyond that, what OpenAI has done now is they embedded actually an image capability, right? So and also voice recognition. So this title says ChatGPT can now see, hear, and speak, which is almost having these like sensory, kind of like inputs. And then, it is, of course, let's say, more powerful to talk to you. This example is pretty much showing, hey, I want to learn about, how this lock, adjust my seat height. Can you help me? It's an interesting, but also not so interesting example. But when you think about the language model working with the image model, taking the image, processing it, seeing let's say the lock there, and trying to tell you how you could, like let's say the clamp there, and then kind of like adjust the height is super impressive. And I think this is a way for us to understand, like, sometimes AI tools will be, used for creative purposes or like prediction of future, but also they're going to be a part of our just like daily life, helping us, supporting us with things, which has been the case, right? Everybody, like, we have been using voice models on Alexa, or hey Google, right? We talk to Google and so on, search for things and so on, and or in our writing, let's say tools like Grammarly, or or even like Microsoft Word, right? So I expect these tools to actually be injected in these kind of models. So again, they will become a natural extension of the tools that we use today. All right, so let's talk about Runway really fast. So Runway was using, again, stable diffusion under the hood a while ago to generate images by prompting. And prior to that, again, you could, in the ML lab they had, you could train your own models. And now, actually, you can generate 5 to 15 or more, probably, videos just by prompting. So they are solely looking into video generation, so you can describe a cinematic scene in whichever event, and it would render that for you, which is super interesting. Which means that its model images are, of course, the image models I have been using, the static models. Runway is doing all this interpolation of frames, so it has to learn from movies, cinematography, lighting in the movies, characters, stage setup, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty interesting model. And you will see a note at the bottom right side which says it's generated by Gen 1 and Gen 2. So probably we're going to see Gen 3 really soon from Runway. But again, it's an interesting tool to generate video just by prompting, or just giving a seed image and then creating videos, quick clips. All right, Move AI. Again, I discovered this recently. I just want to share it. It's pretty interesting because you can capture videos, and then it's going to extract the motion from that. That's pretty powerful. Just using like base videos would help you get the motion of human beings, so you can get really natural motion in spaces and use that in research, right? And then you can map your own, let's say, 3D assets and digital creations onto those kind of like motions. So this can go into very different fields. So it can be used, let's say, in sports research, right? So you can look into how people are moving, but at the same time entertainment industry, or a movie industry, or like gaming industry, video gaming industry, and so on and so forth. So the last one that I'm going to talk about is stable diffusion. Again, I'll remind you to go back to Viscom AI and try it because it's more natural. But if you get more interested in digging into like technical side of things, I'm including a PDF that shows you how to install stable diffusion and control net to your computer, right? And then you can use it on a browser. So Viscom is actually using control net under the hood, right? So it's kind of taking these images, control net, this is what it does. Taking the images and tracing them to find the edges. So it's first converting them into sketches, right? And then you can use those sketches to re-render them as realistic creations or concepts. So that's pretty interesting. I'm leaving a PDF and a YouTube link which shows you to how to install this thing. So you can customize the tool. You can use any different models that you want to use, and then it only works on a browser. The only thing is you will need a NVIDIA GPU on your computer. So if you have that, if you're interested in installing this and playing with it, please check the video and the PDF. I'm not including it here because it's going to take 15 to 20 minutes for me to explain it. But again, it's going to be totally free. You can create infinitely many images as you want. Actually, you're going to get really good if you use this tool to understand the hidden parameters of text to image systems. So I'd really recommend installing it if you are tech savvy, or if you want to get really good and have a deep understanding of how these tools really work, and how you can become a master in utilizing these tools for your workflow. Okay, so what can we expect? I'm going to extend this discussion a little more, but again, just to remind you, I showed 5 tools, but note that these tools may become very successful. They may explode, or they may disappear overnight, depending on the reception, how people use them, and also depending on the investment, of course, the investment companies make into them, and their success will be determined over time, right? So my suggestion is just be familiar with them. Even if you're not using them, just have a look at them. There's a lot of material online on YouTube and so on and so forth. I'm sharing really kind of like in detail. So be aware of them, because ignoring them will not help, whether or not you like them. But being aware always helps, and then you pick and choose. You may choose not to use any of it, and it's totally fine. But knowing what you're not using is super valuable too, because it's going to empower you, to talk and argue why you prefer to use a tool instead of another one, or why you prefer not using it, or the third option, why you're really interested in using these tools and how you're kind of like getting better in them. So it's always helpful to have a look at them. Let's look at briefly what tools are available generally, and where they may expand to, just to make you aware. So there's the text to image. You give a text and it generates an image. There's image to image. So you can only give image and just ask it to produce something without a text prompt. Stable Diffusion and Midjourney would do that. Or you can add the text prompt and an image and get a result. Once you get an image, you can change a portion of it, like Photoshop, deleting, erasing, and generatively filling it. So almost every tool has it now. Midjourney has it, Stable Diffusion, you can do it. Photoshop has generative fill for an area, which got much better in the last couple of months. And you can get images and interpolate them, which kind of like stitches these images. And After Effects was doing something similar in the past. Now you have it in Runway. Runway is a pretty good one for generating those kind of videos. Sketch the render right here. Okay, sketch the render, Viscom, right? So you draw, you may or may not give a text prompt, and it generates really interesting images. Text to video, Runway, we talked about it. Chatbot, I talked about it a lot. Image to 3D. So image to 3D mesh, there is research about this, but it's super complicated. And again, the reason being, first, there's not enough 3D data. Second, it's much harder to parse that data. So it's going to take a while for these models to get there. Or even if you get something, let's say a 3D model, there are tools now doing that. They are pretty crude, so you cannot really use it for, let's say, beyond the concept models. If you want to go into detail, you have to go and craft that, using conventional techniques. And then text to 3D and image to 3D. I think these are going to come really soon. All right, with that, again, what to expect in generative AI landscape overview. After we saw all these tools, we learned about the landscape. We have to know that the tools, the AI models are very big now, right? Large language models. Image models are using billions of images. I will talk about that in the next class. And that's making them somehow general purpose, right? So most of the models are, let's say, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. They create any sort of image. If you want to customize them, you have to make custom training, let's say, to make human faces, to generate cars, to generate, skyscrapers, to generate section drawings, right? Which is somehow hard for, AI to actually generate nowadays, which is going to be fixed, right? So from that perspective, I think the models will maybe become smaller by using, those kind of like base models and, custom models on top of it and custom tools. It's gonna probably go that way. So then instead of being these generalists which are trying to solve a lot of problems and failing in them, they're gonna be more like concentrated specialist tools. Diffusion models, we talked about them, text to image, image to image, large language models, text generation models fit into these descriptions. And there are the voice models, which they don't speak about much, only touched upon, in terms of kind of giving these, let's say, prompts to the tools, which kind of ease our life for the tasks that we're taking care of. So my prediction is also, I think the ChatGPT blending photography, imagery, text generation, and image generation is a good example for showing, AI models will try to emulate what humans do with sensory inputs, because we understand the world by seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting, and so on and so forth. So, which makes us super intelligent and, connected with our environment. So all the AI models are missing that as of now. So the question is, how can we make them more engaged with the environment so that they become, like more aware, more quote unquote artificially intelligent again, but they can respond to the situations better. I talked about that when I covered the history of AI, saying, at some point AI researchers realized that you cannot really inject intelligence to machines. You rather need to come up with systems that have like that can get sensory inputs and learn from their environments, so they can get better or more intelligent that way, right? So it was a paradigm shift in, let's say, the AI research, and now we see today that's being, tested and tried. So again, artificial intelligence is replicating, emulating the human intelligence in a perceptive and sensory way, which is interesting. And moving forward, again, with that, I will expect all these tools to become parts of existing software. So people generally tend to think things will change overnight, but that almost never happens in the history. I talked about this as well in the previous classes. You wake up to the next day and the world is pretty much the same, although there are kind of like technological advancements, right? So what's going to happen is we see, for instance, generative filling or generative image generation in Photoshop now, which is a huge platform, right? So we have been using Photoshop for decades now. And then these generative AI tools are making tool become smarter, more responsive, more creative, help us get more creative, and so on and so forth. So I would expect these models to pretty much get injected into any tool you use, right? Grammarly for fixing the text, in Word, maybe, presentation tools that will become better, PowerPoint, which is not the best presentation tool, is suggesting, some, let's say, image configurations to users already. Maybe they will, start learning from your behavior patterns and so on. And then any tool like, like Miro, they will, again, like learn from the users and embed these AI tools and so on and so forth. And eventually, maybe, 3D CAD platforms will also learn from, again, the users, and, will help you. Let's say some extensions like Grasshopper, they will help you build models faster. With that, actually, we should mention that Grasshopper has been featuring machine learning tools for a long time now, right? So if you're trying to do single objective or multi-objective evolutionary design, let's say processes, these tools already exist and you can employ them in Grasshopper. So we just expect them to get smarter as we move forward. All right. With that, I'm going to close this lesson. Hopefully it was helpful for you to understand this huge landscape of generative AI. In the following classes, we will start digging deeper, a little deeper into the specific tools that are useful for designers so you can employ them for your personal use. See you in the next one.